My name is Natalie Chen, and I'm 29 years old. Have you ever disappointed someone you love so deeply that they question your entire life choices? For years, my father watched me work at Seattle Youth Foundation helping homeless kids for $52,000 a year while living in a studio apartment. And I could see the frustration in his eyes every time we talked. He'd built a multi-million-dollar development company and couldn't understand why his daughter chose poverty wages over joining the family business. What he saw as wasted potential, I saw as purpose. What he called naive idealism, I called making a difference. But I had no idea that on one stormy October evening, my choice to help a stranger on the highway would uncover something about my own family that would change everything I thought I knew about my father, my inheritance, and the lies that had been shaping my life for years. This is that story, and it starts with me sitting in my tiny office at 8 p.m., staring at my phone as my father's name lit up the screen, knowing this conversation would drain whatever energy I had left. "Hey Dad, what's up, Natalie?" His voice carried that familiar mix of disappointment and controlled frustration. "You got my invitation for Saturday night, right? The birthday gala at Bellevue Country Club." Of course I got it. Hard to miss the gold-embossed cardstock that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Good. This isn't just a party, sweetheart. I need you there. Sterling Ventures will be attending, along with half the tech executives in Seattle. This deal could transform Chen Industries. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair that squeaked with every movement, watching a homeless encampment's tarps flutter in the wind across the bay. "Dad, you know I'll be there." "I wouldn't miss your 58. That's not what I'm concerned about." His tone sharpened. "What I'm concerned about is you showing up looking professional, like someone who belongs in that room, like someone who understands what family means." There it was, the familiar sting. I understand what family means, Dad. I also understand that some things matter more than impressing investors. Like what? Like playing savior to people who'll never change, like wasting your University of Washington marketing degree on a nonprofit that pays you what? $52,000 a year. Your stepmother's purses cost more than your monthly salary. My jaw tightened. Mom always said helping others wasn't about the money. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Mom, Lisa Piton Chen, the woman who kept her maiden name professionally because she believed in honoring your roots. The woman who died of cancer 9 years ago, leaving me adrift in a family that never quite felt complete again. "Your mother was a wonderful woman," he said finally, "but she also lived in a different world. A simpler time. You can't run a modern business on good intentions and flower power, idealism." She ran a successful marketing consultancy, I reminded him. Built it from nothing while raising 2 kids. That's not idealism, that's determination. And look where it got her. Working herself to death for clients who replaced her within a week. His voice softened slightly. "Natalie, I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to protect you from making the same mistakes. Chen Industries could use someone with your skills. Someone who understands both sides. Both sides of what? Both sides of how the world actually works. You can help people more effectively with real resources than with grant applications and wishful thinking." I rubbed my temples, feeling the onset of a headache. "We've had this conversation before, and we'll keep having it until you come to your senses. Saturday night, 7 p.m. sharp, cocktail attire. And Natalie, please don't wear anything that makes you look like you're going to a protest rally." The line went dead. I stared at my reflection in the dark window, seeing my mother's determined chin and my father's stubborn eyes. The genetic lottery had given me the worst of both worlds, Lisa's bleeding heart and David's need for control. Constantly at war with each other. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler Williams. "My 16-year-old stepbrother. Dad's been pacing his office all day. Sophia's freaking about the party too. Something about needing everything perfect for the investors. You should probably prepare for maximum drama." Tyler was the unexpected gift in my father's remarriage to Sophia, Chen Williams 7 years ago. While his mother brought her interior design credentials and social, climbing ambitions to our family, Tyler brought genuine kindness and a refreshing lack of pretense. Another text from Tyler: "Grace keeps asking if you're coming to Daddy's party. She's been practicing walking in her dress shoes all week." My heart clenched. Grace Chen, my 6-year-old half-sister, was the one pure thing in our complicated family equation. Born 3 years after Dad remarried, she represented hope and new beginnings in ways that sometimes made me ash with missing what we'd lost. I typed back, "Tell her I'll be there." I wouldn't miss seeing my favorite princess. The truth was more complicated. I'd been dreading Saturday night for weeks. The Bellevue Country Club represented everything I'd spent my adult life rejecting conspicuous consumption, social hierarchies based on net worth, and conversations that treated poverty like a distant concept rather than the reality I worked with every day. But Grace would be there, probably wearing some designer dress that cost more than my monthly car payment, looking for her big sister in the crowd. And despite everything, David Chen was still my father, the man who'd held my hand through Lisa's chemotherapy appointments and taught me to drive in the Microsoft campus parking lot on Sundays when security was light. I packed my laptop and locked the office, walking past framed photos of kids we'd helped, former runaways who'd completed GED programs, teenage mothers who'd found stable housing, kids who'd aged out of foster care and learned job skills. Their faces reminded me why I chose this path despite family pressure and financial struggle. The drive home to Capitol Hill took 25 minutes through Seattle's inevitable traffic. My studio apartment occupied the top floor of a converted 1920s house with hardwood floors that creaked and a kitchen barely large enough for one person. The Space Needle glowed in the distance, a reminder of the city's constant reinvention. I kicked off my shoes and poured a glass of the cheap wine I kept for particularly long days. The voicemail light blinked insistently on my landline, a relic I kept because cell service in the apartment was spotty. Miss Chen, this is James Porter calling again about an urgent matter regarding your mother's estate. Specifically, issues related to Lisa Piton Chen's trust fund that require your immediate attention. Please call me at your earliest convenience. This matter cannot wait much longer. I deleted the message without writing down the number. Lawyers only called when someone was in trouble or someone was dead. Mom had been dead for 9 years. Whatever paperwork needed signatures could wait until after I survived Saturday night's performance as the dutiful daughter who definitely wasn't wasting her life on poor people. Setting my wine glass on the windowsill, I looked out at the Seattle skyline and tried to imagine myself in cocktail attire, making small talk about real estate development with people who saw homeless camps as eyesores rather than humanitarian crises. Maybe Dad was right. Maybe I was fighting a losing battle against problems too big for grant funding and good intentions. Maybe it was time to grow up and join the family business, trade my idealism for a salary that would let me afford more than ramen noodles and student loan payments. But then I thought about Grace's excited face when she talked about Daddy's party and Tyler's warning about family drama, and the homeless encampment visible from my office window. Some battles were worth fighting even when you couldn't win. Saturday night could wait. Right now, I had a bottle of wine and the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd spent another day trying to make the world slightly less terrible. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzling, typical October weather that made Seattle feel like it was wrapped in a damp blanket. I was measuring coffee grounds when someone knocked on my apartment door with the kind of confidence that suggested they owned every space they entered. Michael Chen stood in my hallway holding 2 Starbucks cups and wearing his weekend uniform of pressed khakis and a button-down that probably cost more than my monthly utilities. My older brother had inherited Dad's business instincts and Mom's diplomatic skills, which made him the perfect investment banker and the family's designated peacekeeper. Thought you might need caffeine before tonight, he said, handing me a cup, venti Pike Place with oat milk. Some habits never change. Thanks. I stepped aside to let him in, noticing how he surveyed my tiny apartment with barely concealed concern. Want to sit? I only have one chair that isn't covered in work papers. Actually, I was hoping we could take a drive. There's something you should see. 20 minutes later, we were heading east on I-90 toward Bellevue in Michael's Tesla. Seattle's skyline shrinking behind us. The radio played some inoffensive alternative rock that probably tested well with his demographic. So what's really going on tonight, I asked, watching million-dollar homes slide past the window. Dad seemed more stressed than usual about this party. Michael's grip tightened on the steering wheel. The Sterling Ventures deal isn't just important, Nat. It's survival. Chen Industries has been leveraged to the hilt for the past 3 years, betting everything on this waterfront development project. If Sterling pulls out, we're looking at bankruptcy within 6 months. I nearly choked on my coffee. Bankruptcy. Dad never said anything about financial problems. Of course he didn't. David Chen doesn't admit weakness, especially not to his daughter who chose social work over joining the family business. But the numbers don't lie. We owe $12 million in construction loans, another $8 million in land acquisition costs, and the Seattle real estate market is starting to cool off. We pulled into the driveway of my childhood home, a sprawling contemporary house in Bellevue's most exclusive neighborhood. The circular drive was filled with catering trucks and florists, vans, Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see Sophia directing an army of workers with the intensity of a military operation. "Look, I get why you don't want to join the company," Michael continued. "I respect your principles. But tonight isn't about principles. It's about keeping our family from losing everything Dad spent 30 years building." I stared at the house where I'd grown up, where Mom had hosted book clubs and organized neighborhood fundraisers, where she'd taught me that success meant making other people's lives better, not just making money. What exactly are you asking me to do? Just be yourself. But maybe dial down the social justice warrior thing for one evening. Smile at the investors. Let them see that David Chen raised successful, well-adjusted children who understand the importance of family and business. Before I could respond, the front door opened and Grace came running down the stone pathway, wearing a pink tutu and light-up sneakers. Her face lit up when she saw me through the car window. "Natalie, you came early. Mommy said you might not come because you're always busy helping sad people." I climbed out of the Tesla and scooped her into a hug, breathing in her strawberry shampoo scent. "Hey, princess, I missed you. Are you excited about Daddy's party?" She nodded enthusiastically. "I get to stay up until 8:30 and wear my fancy dress with the sparkles. Tyler said there might be dancing." Tyler appeared behind her, looking uncomfortable in khakis and a polo shirt. His usually messy hair was gelled into submission, making him look younger than his 16 years. "Hey, Nat, Mom's been in full crisis mode since 6 a.m. Fair warning, she's got some opinions about your outfit for tonight." As if summoned by his words, Sophia Chen Williams emerged from the house wearing yoga pants and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly salary. At 42, she maintained the kind of effortless elegance that required daily personal training sessions and quarterly visits to expensive medical spas. "Natalie." She air-kissed both my cheeks, a habit she'd picked up during her brief period living in Paris. "After college, I'm so glad you're here early. We need to discuss your look for tonight." "My look, well, you know how important first impressions are with potential investors." I took the liberty of pulling some options from my closet. "We're about the same size, though you might need a push-up bra." Heat crept up my neck. "Sophia, I brought my own dress." "I'm sure you did, sweetheart, but this isn't a non-profit fundraiser. This is serious business with serious people who notice details. Come on, let's see what we're working with." Michael caught my elbow as Sophia herded me toward the house. "Remember what I said about tonight being important." The interior of my childhood home had been transformed into something from a luxury lifestyle magazine. White orchids filled crystal vases, ambient lighting cast everything in a golden glow, and the familiar family photos had been replaced with abstract art that matched the evening's sophisticated aesthetic. I followed Sophia up the curved staircase to what used to be my bedroom and was now her walk-in closet. Racks of designer clothing lined the walls like armor for social warfare. "Now," she said, pulling out a black cocktail dress with strategic cutouts, "this Diane von Furstenberg would be perfect. Sophisticated but approachable. It shows you understand quality without being flashy." I fingered the fabric, probably worth 3 months of my salary. "This is beautiful, but I already have something. Honey, I'm sure whatever you picked out is lovely for your usual events, but tonight requires a certain level of—" She paused, searching for diplomatic phrasing. "Gravitas. These people need to see that David raised a daughter who appreciates the finer things in life." Grace bounced into the room wearing her party dress, a confection of pink silk and crystal beading that made her look like a tiny princess. "Aunt Natalie, you're so pretty," she announced. "Mommy, can I wear makeup like Aunt Natalie?" Sophia smoothed Grace's hair with practiced maternal efficiency. "When you're older, baby girl. Right now you're perfect just as you are." The simple gesture reminded me that beneath Sophia's social, climbing, and material obsessions lay genuine love for her daughter. Whatever complicated feelings existed between us, she was a devoted mother who wanted Grace to have every advantage. "Why don't you pick whichever dress feels right?" I said diplomatically. "I trust your judgment." Relief flooded Sophia's face. "Wonderful. And maybe we could do something with your hair." "Nothing dramatic. Just something more polished than your usual ponytail." My phone buzzed with another call from the unknown number that had been leaving voicemails about Mom's estate. I declined it, not wanting to deal with legal complications before an already stressful evening. Tyler appeared in the doorway. "Lisa Rodriguez is here to coordinate with the catering staff. She wanted to know if you'd be arriving with the family or—" "Separately. I'll come separately," I said. "That way, if I need to leave early, I won't strand anyone." Sophia's perfectly sculpted eyebrows drew together. Why would you need to leave early? Just covering my bases? The truth was more complicated. Being here surrounded by luxury and family expectations made me feel like I was wearing someone else's skin. The expensive dress, the professional hairstyling, the careful conversation with investors who saw people like my homeless youth clients as statistics rather than human beings with stories and dreams. But looking at Grace's excited face and remembering Michael's warning about the family business teetering on the edge of collapse, I realized tonight wasn't really about me. Sometimes love meant playing a role, even when it felt like betraying your authentic self. The weather forecast predicted storms later, but for now, weak afternoon sunlight struggled through the clouds, casting everything in the kind of uncertain light that made promises seem fragile and the future impossible to predict. October 15th arrived with the kind of Seattle storm that made you question every decision that required leaving the house. By 6 p.m., rain was hammering my apartment windows and the weather service was issuing flood warnings for low-lying areas throughout King County. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, trying to convince myself that Sophia's borrowed black cocktail dress didn't make me look like I was playing dress-up in someone else's life. The Diane von Furstenberg fabric hugged in places I wasn't used to being hugged, and the strategic cutouts felt more strategic than I was comfortable with. But looking at my reflection, I had to admit Sophia knew what she was doing. The dress transformed my usual nonprofit coordinator appearance into something that might pass for sophisticated in a room full of tech, money, and old Seattle families. My phone buzzed with the fourth missed call from Dad in the past hour. Each voicemail grew progressively more tense. The first had been almost cheerful. "Sweetheart, just confirming you'll be here by 7. The fourth was pure David Chen business mode. "Natalie, I don't know what game you're playing, but Sterling Ventures arrived 20 minutes early and they're asking about family involvement in community outreach. Call me back immediately." I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, then stopped. Something felt wrong about tonight beyond the usual family drama. Maybe it was the storm, or maybe it was the insistent voicemails from James Porter about Mom's estate that I kept ignoring. But standing in my tiny apartment doorway, I had the strangest feeling that everything was about to change. The drive from Capitol Hill to Bellevue normally took 30 minutes. In Saturday night storm traffic, it could take an hour. I merged onto Interstate 405, windshield wipers working overtime against sheets of rain that made the highway look like a river. The radio alternated between weather warnings and classic rock, creating an oddly apocalyptic soundtrack for my journey to family obligation. Traffic crawled past the Microsoft campus, past strip malls and new construction projects, past the invisible dividing line between Seattle proper and its wealthy East Side suburbs. My phone continued buzzing with texts from Michael, "Dad's losing it. Where are you?" And from Tyler, "Grace keeps asking when you're coming." Sophia's stress eating the appetizers. I was having a good time despite the weather when traffic suddenly stopped completely about 2 miles past the Coal Creek exit. Red brake lights stretched ahead like a constellation of frustration. I checked the clock, 6:45. Even if traffic started moving immediately, I'd be cutting it close. That's when I saw her. A black Tesla sat on the shoulder about a quarter-mile ahead, hazard lights blinking like a distress signal. Even through the rain and distance, I could see a woman standing beside the car, cell phone pressed to her ear in the universal gesture of technological desperation. She was young, probably late 30s or early 40s, wearing what looked like an expensive business suit getting systematically destroyed by the Pacific Northwest weather. Traffic inched forward, bringing me closer to the scene. The woman had given up on her phone and was standing with her arms wrapped around herself, looking utterly stranded. Other cars passed without slowing. Their drivers focused on their own destinations, their own problems, their own carefully planned Saturday night schedules. I should have been one of them. I was already going to be late. And Dad had made crystal clear how important tonight was for the family business. The last thing I needed was to arrive even later, especially looking like I'd been wrestling with car engines in designer clothing. But as I drew alongside the Tesla, the woman looked up and our eyes met through my rain-streaked window. She looked exactly like I felt most days, competent and professional on the surface, but completely overwhelmed by circumstances beyond her control. It was the same expression I'd worn during Mom's final hospital stay, when the world kept moving while mine fell apart. I thought about Lisa Paton Chen, who'd taught me that helping strangers wasn't just charity, it was humanity. Who'd stopped countless times to assist stranded motorists despite being late for client meetings or school events. Who'd raised me to believe that character was measured by what you Did when no one was watching and nothing was in it for you. My phone buzzed with another call from Dad. I let it go to voicemail and pulled onto the shoulder 20 feet, behind the Tesla. The woman looked up in surprise as I approached. Rain immediately soaking through Sophia's expensive dress. I need some help, oh thank God. Her voice carried a slight East Coast accent. Educated, but not pretentious. My phone died and I have no idea what's wrong with this damn car. I've got a crucial meeting at 7 and I'm completely screwed. Pop the hood, let me take a look. She stared at me like I'd offered to perform brain surgery. You know about cars. My grandfather ran an auto shop for 40 years. I picked up a thing or two. The Tesla's engine was a marvel of German engineering and contemporary design, but engines were engine, and the problem was obvious within 30 seconds. Steam rose from the radiator, and I could see the telltale signs of an overheated cooling system. You're not going anywhere without letting this cool down and probably adding coolant, I told her. But I might be able to jury-rig something to get you to a service station. How? I jogged back to my Honda Civic and retrieved the emergency kit Mom had insisted I carry. Basic tools, electrical tape, a bottle of water, and the kind of practical supplies that had saved me more times than I could count. Working on the Tesla's cooling system in a formal dress while rain soaked through to my skin felt like some kind of cosmic joke. But as I wrapped electrical tape around a loose connection and used my water bottle to refill the coolant reservoir, I felt more like myself than I had all day. This should get you about 15 miles if you take it easy, I said, wiping grease off my hands with napkins from my glove compartment. There's a good service station off exit 31. Family-owned places they won't rip you off because of the car. The woman watched me work with something like amazement. I'm Elena Sterling, she said, Natalie Chen. Well, Natalie Piton professionally, but Chen tonight. Why did you stop? Everyone else just drove past. I tightened the last piece of tape. Rain dripping from my hair onto the engine. Because I know what it's like to be stranded when everyone's too busy to care. Elena pulled a business card from her purse. Thick cardstock that somehow stayed pristine despite the weather. Please take this. I owe you dinner at the very least. Where were you heading? I've made you incredibly late. Just a family thing, I said, sliding the card into my purse without really looking at it. Birthday party in Bellevue. Something flickered in Elena's eyes. The Chen Industries event at the country club. How did you know? I'm Elena Sterling of Sterling Ventures. I believe we're going to the same party. Elena Sterling followed me through the gates of Bellevue Country Club in her limping Tesla. Both of us arriving at 9:15 to a scene that looked like something from a movie about rich people's problems. Valets in matching uniforms scrambled to deal with our bedraggled convoy, their faces carefully neutral as they took in my oil-stained dress and Elena's rain-soaked business suit. I'm going to clean up and make my entrance separately, Elena said as we stood under the covered portico. This is your family. You should handle this your way. The country club's main ballroom blazed with warm light against the stormy October evening. Crystal chandeliers casting everything in golden elegance that made my disheveled appearance even more jarring. Through the floor-to-ceiling window, I could see Seattle's tech elite mingling with old money families, everyone perfectly groomed and precisely on brand for their respective social circles. I entered through the main doors just as Dad was concluding his presentation to the investors. The conversation died like someone had hit a mute button. 200 heads turned toward me, taking in my ruined dress, my wet hair, the faint smell of motor oil that followed me like a confession. Dad stood frozen beside the microphone, his face cycling through expressions I recognized from childhood. Surprise when I forgot to clean my room. Disappointment when I chose University of Washington over his alma mater Stanford, and now something colder and more final than I'd ever seen before. Grace broke away from her nanny near the gift table and ran toward me on unsteady leg, her sparkly pink dress making her look like a fairy tale princess. Natalie, you came. You look different. Why is your dress all messy? I scooped her into a hug, not caring about transferring grease stains to her silk outfit. Hey, princess. I had some car trouble on the way here. Sometimes helping people gets a little messy. Michael appeared beside us, his face pale with mortification. Nat, what happened to you? Before I could answer, Dad had abandoned the microphone and was walking toward us with measured steps. The investors followed at a respectful distance, clearly uncomfortable but unable to look away from the family drama unfolding before them. Natalie. His voice was low, controlled, but I could hear the fury underneath like a furnace running at full capacity. What exactly happened to you? I helped someone whose car broke down. At 4:05. It took longer than expected. You helped someone. He said it like I'd announced plans to join a circus, tonight. Of all nights. You stopped to help a random stranger and showed up to my birthday. Celebration looking like you've been working in a garage. The room had gone completely silent. Even the string quartet had stopped playing. 200 of Seattle's most influential people were watching David Chen confront his daughter like she was a disappointing employee, rather than family. Dad, maybe we could discuss this privately. No? His voice rose slightly, carrying to every corner of the ballroom. I think it's time everyone understood exactly who my daughter is. This is Natalie Chen, everyone. 29 years old, University of Washington graduate. And apparently someone who thinks playing Good Samaritan is more important than family obligations. Heat flooded my cheeks. I could feel every stare, every whispered comment, every cell phone discreetly recording what would probably become Seattle's social media gossip by morning. In the crowd, I caught a glimpse of Elena Sterling, now cleaned up and elegant, watching the scene with sharp attention. I'm proud to help people when they need it, I said as steadily as I could manage. Mom taught me that kindness isn't something you schedule around. Convenience. Don't. His finger pointed at me like a weapon. Don't you dare bring your mother into this. Lisa knew the importance of family responsibility. She would never have embarrassed me like this in front of colleagues and friends. The mention of Mom felt like a slap. Lisa Peyton Chen, who'd died believing her family would take care of each other, who'd never lived to see her husband turn into someone who valued business deals over human decency. Michael stepped forward, trying to defuse the situation. Dad, everyone's watching. Maybe we should let them watch. Dad turned to address the crowd directly, his voice carrying the authority of a boardroom presentation. My daughter has spent the past several years confused about priorities. She's chosen to work for poverty wages at a nonprofit instead of joining the family business. She lives in Capitol Hill like some kind of struggling artist, despite having access to opportunities most people would kill for. Sophia had materialized beside him, her face a mask of social panic barely contained behind her perfect makeup. David, perhaps this isn't the appropriate venue. This is exactly the appropriate venue. He gestured toward me like I was evidence in a trial. Look at her. Shows up to the most important business event of the year looking like she's been crawling under cars. This is what happens when you enable irresponsible behavior and call it compassion. Tyler pushed through the crowd, his 16-year-old face flushed with anger that made him look startlingly adult. Dad, you need to stop this right now. I need to stop enabling it. Dad's voice was getting louder, more unhinged. For years, I've watched my daughter waste her potential on people who will never appreciate what she's sacrificing for them. Tonight was her chance to show that she understood family comes first. Instead, she chose strangers over blood. Grace was crying now, her small hands covering her ears. The sound cut through my shock and anger, reminding me that whatever was happening between Dad and me, she didn't deserve to witness this destruction. Since family clearly means nothing to you, Dad continued, his words carrying to every corner of the silent ballroom, since you've chosen to embarrass us in front of the most important business associates we've ever entertained, I think it's time you learned that choices have consequences. The pause stretched like a held breath. As of tonight, you are no longer part of the Chen family. You've chosen your path. Now live with it. The words landed like a physical blow, disowned, in front of 200 people, for helping a stranger. I looked at Grace's tear-streaked face, at Tyler's horrified expression, at Michael's obvious shame. Then I looked at Dad, this man I no longer recognized, and realized that losing his approval might actually be a gift. I turned and walked toward the exit, my heels clicking against marble in the profound silence. Behind me, Dad's voice resumed with artificial brightness, trying to salvage his presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, let's focus on what really matters tonight. The future of Seattle's waterfront development. But I was already gone, pushing through the double doors into the storm that felt warmer than anything I'd left behind. In my Honda Civic, I sat for several minutes watching rain cascade down the windshield. My phone exploded with notifications, but I couldn't bring myself to check them yet. David Chen had just disowned his daughter in front of Seattle's business elite for the crime of helping a stranger. He had no idea that the stranger I'd helped was about to become the most important person in his world. I woke up Sunday morning to the sound of my phone buzzing against the hardwood floor where I'd dropped it the night before. Sunlight streamed through my apartment windows, making the events of the previous evening feel like some kind of fever dream. Maybe Dad hadn't really disowned me in front of 200 people. Maybe I hadn't really helped a billionaire fix her car while wearing a borrowed designer dress. Then I tried to check my bank balance and reality crashed back. Account access denied. Please contact your financial institution. My hands shook as I called the customer service line, already knowing what I'd find. David Chen had been the co-signer on my checking account since college, a safety net I'd never bothered to remove. Now that safety net has become a noose, Ms. Chen. I'm sorry, but the account holder has requested that all authorized users be removed effective immediately. The account holder. Not my father, not Dad, the account holder. I hung up and stared at my phone, processing the implications. No bank account meant no access to my savings, pathetic as they were. No way to pay rent, buy groceries, or maintain the basic infrastructure of adult life. David hadn't just disowned me publicly. He'd made sure the consequences would be immediate and devastating. My phone rang. Tyler. Nat, are you okay? I've been trying to call since last night. I'm fine, I lied, though my voice probably gave me away. How's Grace? She cried herself to sleep asking when you were coming. Home. She doesn't understand why Daddy was mean to you. His voice cracked slightly. None of us understand why he did that. Your dad made his position clear. I'm not part of the family anymore. That's bullshit and you know it. You're my sister. Grace's sister. Michael's sister. Dad doesn't get to change that with some dramatic speech. Apparently he does, along with freezing my bank account and probably canceling my health insurance while he was at it. He what? Tyler's anger was so pure it almost made me smile. That's insane. That's actually crazy. He can't do that. Actually, he can. I'm an adult who was stupid enough to let him maintain financial control because it was easier than dealing with paperwork. Before Tyler could respond, someone knocked on my apartment door. 3 sharp raps that suggested urgency without aggression. I have to go, someone's here. Nat, wait. If you need money or anything. You're 16 and live with your parents. There's nothing you can do. I hung up and peered through the peephole, expecting to see my landlord or maybe Michael coming to play family mediator. Instead, I saw Elena Sterling standing in my hallway holding 2 coffee cups and looking remarkably put together for someone who'd spent the previous evening soaked by Seattle rain. She smiled when I opened the door. Good morning. I brought caffeine and an apology for the disaster I caused last night. You didn't cause anything. I stepped aside to let her in, suddenly conscious of my ratty pajamas and the fact that I hadn't brushed my teeth yet. How did you know where I live? You dropped your wallet when you were fixing my car. I found it on the highway shoulder this morning and looked up your address. She handed me my wallet along with one of the coffee cups. The wallet contained my driver's license, my debit card that no longer worked, and about $30 in cash, my entire liquid net worth. Elena surveyed my studio apartment with the same careful attention she'd probably give to a potential investment. Cozy, she said diplomatically. It's a shoebox, but it's my shoebox. Or was. Until my father decided to destroy my life in front of half of Seattle about that. Elena settled into my single chair like she belonged there. I need you to know that what happened last night was not your fault. Your father's reaction was completely disproportionate and frankly, unprofessional. Unprofessional. I almost laughed. You were there to discuss a business deal worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I showed up looking like I'd been wrestling with engines, which I had. From a business perspective, his reaction makes perfect sense. Does it? Elena's voice carried a sharp edge I hadn't heard before. Because from where I sit, David Chen just publicly humiliated his daughter for showing kindness to a stranger. That tells me everything I need to know about his character and judgment. I stared at her over my coffee cup, processing her words. Elena Sterling, CEO of Sterling Ventures, the woman whose investment could save or destroy Chen Industries, was sitting in my apartment criticizing my father's business ethics. You're the investor he needs, I said slowly. The deal that's supposed to save the company. I'm an investor considering a partnership. Last night changed my perspective significantly. Which means what exactly? Elena leaned forward slightly, her expression growing more serious. It means I need to understand what kind of people I'd be partnering with. It means I want to know more about the Chen family dynamics and how they might affect our business relationship. There was something else in her voice, something calculating that made me wonder if this conversation was as spontaneous as it seemed. What do you want to know? Tell me about your work at Seattle Youth Foundation. Tell me about the community impact programs you've developed. Tell me why someone with your skills and education chose nonprofit work over joining a family business worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The questions felt like an interview, but I found myself answering honestly. Maybe it was the caffeine, or maybe it was the relief of talking to someone who didn't seem to think helping strangers was a character flaw. I told her about the homeless youth services program I'd designed, about the partnerships with local businesses for job training, about the kids who'd aged out of foster care and needed support, navigating adult life. Elena listened with the kind of focused attention that made me feel like my work actually mattered. "Impressive," she said when I finished. "You've built something meaningful with limited resources. That takes vision and execution skills." "Thanks." Though apparently it also takes a complete lack of family loyalty, according to my father. "Your father is wrong." Elena stood up, smoothing her jacket in a gesture that somehow conveyed both elegance and authority. "In fact, I'd like to discuss a proposition with you." "A proposition?" Sterling Ventures specializes in sustainable development projects with strong community impact components. We're always looking for people who understand local needs and can bridge the gap between business interests and social responsibility. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a consulting contract. $5,000 per week to help us understand Seattle's community landscape and develop meaningful partnerships with local organizations." $5,000 per week. More than I made in a month at the foundation. "There's one condition," Elena continued. "The position would require working directly with potential business partners, including Chen Industries, if we move forward with David's proposal." "You want me to work on my father's deal?" "The same father who disowned me 12 hours ago. I want you to help me understand whether Chen Industries is the kind of company Sterling Ventures should partner with. Someone with your background and perspective would be invaluable in that assessment." My phone rang again. An unknown number that had been calling all morning. "I should probably take this, Ms. Chen. This is James Porter calling again about your mother's estate. The trust fund matter has become urgent and cannot wait any longer. Please call me today without fail." I hung up without writing down his number, just as I had every time he'd called over the past month. "Problem?" Elena asked. "Just some lawyer who thinks there's paperwork I need to sign related to my mom's estate. She died 9 years ago. I'm sure whatever it is can wait." Elena's expression shifted, becoming more alert. "What kind of estate matters? I don't know. Probably some old insurance policy or retirement account that got overlooked. My mom wasn't wealthy." Elena was quiet for a moment, studying my face with new intensity. "Natalie, I think you should call that lawyer back today." "Why?" "Because in my experience, lawyers don't call repeatedly about unimportant paperwork, and because timing is rarely coincidental in business." Before I could ask what she meant, my phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "Dad changed the locks on the house. Lisa Rodriguez says he told the staff you're not welcome anymore." "This is insane." The message hit me like a physical blow. Not welcome in my childhood home. Locked out of the house where Mom had raised me, where her presence still lingered in family photos and Christmas ornaments, in the kitchen where she'd taught me to cook. Elena must have seen something in my face. "What happened?" "My father changed the locks. I'm officially persona non grata." Elena's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "That seals it. I'm withdrawing Sterling Ventures from consideration of the Chen Industries partnership. You can't do that. Whatever my father's personal failings, there are other people who work for that company. My brother Michael, dozens of employees who need those jobs, which is exactly why I'm offering you that consulting position." Elena stood up, gathering her purse with brisk efficiency. "Think about it, Natalie. You can help me understand the real impact of our investment, decisions on the Seattle community. You can make sure that if Sterling Ventures does business here, it's with partners who share our values." She headed for the door, then paused. "And call that lawyer. Trust me on this one." After she left, I sat in my tiny apartment, drinking cooling coffee and staring at my phone. Elena Sterling's business card lay on my coffee table next to James Porter's number. 2 pieces of paper that might represent my immediate future. Outside my window, Seattle hummed with Sunday morning life. People walking dogs, couples heading to brunch, families who hadn't imploded over car repairs and misplaced loyalty. My phone rang again. James Porter. This time I answered. James Porter's downtown office occupied the 32nd floor of a building overlooking Pike Place Market, with floor-to-ceiling windows that made Seattle look like a model city spread out for inspection. At 71 years old, Porter moved with the careful precision of someone who'd spent decades handling other people's most important secrets. "Thank you for finally returning my calls, Ms. Chen. Or do you prefer Peyton professionally? Either is fine." I settled into a leather chair that probably cost more than my monthly salary at the foundation. "You said this was about my mother's estate." "Indeed." He opened a thick file folder with Lisa Piton Chen printed on the tab in neat block letters. "Your mother's financial affairs were more complex than you might realize." "Complex how?" Mom worked as a marketing consultant. She wasn't exactly a financial powerhouse. Porter pulled out a document that looked official and intimidating. Your maternal grandfather, Thomas Piton, established a trust fund in 1995. Shortly after your birth, $3 million invested in a diversified portfolio with instructions that the principal would transfer to his daughter, Lisa, and upon her death to her children at age 30. I stared at the paper, the words not quite computing. A trust fund. $3 million. There's more. After your mother's death in 2016, her $2 million life insurance policy was also placed into the trust structure, along with the proceeds from selling her consulting business. The trust has been professionally managed by Cascade Investment Services for the past 9 years. My mouth felt dry. How much is it worth now? Porter consulted another document. As of last Friday's valuation, approximately $12.3 million. The number hung in the air like something from another universe. $12 million. More money than I'd ever imagined having enough to buy a house, pay off my student loans, donate to every charity in Seattle, and still have enough left over to live comfortably for the rest of my life. Where has this money been for the past 9 years? That's where the situation becomes complicated. Porter's expression grew grim. Your father was appointed as interim trustee with authority to manage the funds until you reached age 30. However, he was required to provide annual accountings and ensure the money was invested conservatively for your benefit, and so did he. Porter handed me a thick stack of bank statements and investment records. According to these documents, your father has been regularly transferring money from the trust to various Chen Industries accounts, always labeled as temporary loans or investment opportunities that would benefit the overall portfolio. I flipped through pages of financial transactions, seeing my name on accounts I'd never heard of, watching hundreds of thousands of dollars move between trust funds and business accounts like some kind of elaborate shell game. How much has he taken? Approximately $4.7 million over the past 8 years, all without your knowledge or consent, and all in violation of his fiduciary responsibilities as trustee. I set the papers down with shaking hands. My father had stolen almost $5 million from me. Money. My grandfather had saved money my mother had earned, money that was supposed to secure my future. Instead, David had used it to prop up his failing business while letting me struggle with student loans and worry about rent payments. What can I do about it? Porter leaned back in his chair. Washington state law is clear on fiduciary duty violations. Your father can be held liable for the full amount he's taken, plus penalties and interest. The total restitution could approach $6 million. And if he can't pay it back, then you have grounds for criminal charges. Theft of this magnitude is a Class A felony, punishable by up to 10 years in prison. 10 years in prison. For my father, the man who'd taught me to ride a bike and held me while I cried over my first broken heart. There's something else, Porter continued. Under the original trust term, you gain full control of all funds on your 30th birthday. That's next month, November 15th. Next month. The timing couldn't be coincidental. Your father is undoubtedly aware of this deadline, Porter said, which explains his recent behavior toward you. If you were to discover the trust and demand an accounting, it would expose years of unauthorized transfers. So he disowned me to keep me from finding out about my own money. It's possible, though I should mention that disowning you doesn't change your legal rights to the trust fund. The money belongs to you regardless of your family relationships. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena Sterling. Have you spoken with the lawyer yet? I have some information that might be relevant. I showed Porter the message. Do you know Elena Sterling by reputation? Sterling Ventures has an excellent track record for ethical business practices. Why do you ask? She's offered me a consulting job, and she seemed very interested in my family dynamics, particularly regarding business partnerships. Porter's eyebrows rose slightly. Interesting timing. I understand Sterling Ventures is considering a major investment in Chen Industries. They are, or were. Elena seemed to have second thoughts after witnessing my father's performance last night. Ms. Peaton, may I offer some advice, please? Your father is in a desperate situation. Chen Industries is highly leveraged and needs capital quickly. The trust fund money he's borrowed has probably been keeping the company afloat for months, if not years. When you turn 30 and gain control of the trust, he'll be forced to return funds he no longer has. Which means what? Which means he has very strong incentives to either discredit you as a trust beneficiary or find another source of capital before next month. The Sterling Ventures deal isn't just an opportunity for him. It's survival. I thought about Elena's job offer, about her questions regarding Chen Industries' character and values, about her withdrawal from partnership consideration after witnessing Dad's public humiliation campaign. What would you recommend I do? Porter gathered the trust documents into a neat stack. First, I'll file the necessary papers to remove your father as trustee and restore your control over the funds. Second, we'll demand a complete accounting of all trust transactions since 2016. Third, we'll calculate exactly how much he owes in restitution and give him 30 days to make arrangements for repayment, and if he refuses, then we pursue criminal charges and civil recovery. The choice will be his. My phone rang. Elena Sterling. I need to take this. Natalie, I hope you've had that conversation with your lawyer. I have some information about Chen Industries' financial situation that might interest you. What kind of information? The kind that suggests your family's business troubles are more serious than they've been publicly acknowledged. Can we meet this afternoon? I looked at James Porter, who was watching me with the expression of someone who'd seen this kind of family drama play out many times before. Yes, I said into the phone. I think we should definitely meet. After I hung up, Porter handed me his business card along with copies of all the trust documents. Miss Piton, you're about to become a very wealthy young woman. You're also about to discover that money doesn't solve family problems. If anything, it makes them more complicated. I tucked the papers into my purse, feeling their weight like a physical burden. $12 million. Enough to change everything. Or destroy what little family I had left. The question was whether there was anything left worth saving. Elena Sterling's office occupied the entire 42nd floor, the Columbia Center, with panoramic views that made Seattle look like a carefully arranged diorama. The space was modern, minimalist, all clean lines and neutral colors. The kind of environment where million-dollar decisions were made with the same casual efficiency as ordering coffee. Elena poured 2 cups from an expensive-looking espresso machine while I tried to process everything James Porter had told me about the trust fund. $12 million. My father stole nearly $5 million. Criminal charges and 10-year prison sentences dancing around the edges of my family's destruction. I've been doing some research on Chen Industries, Elena said, settling across from me at a glass conference table. Their financial situation is more precarious than David probably wants to admit. How precarious? Elena opened a tablet and scrolled through what looked like detailed financial reports. Chen Industries owes approximately $20 million in various loans and construction financing. Their liquid assets total maybe $3 million, and that's being generous about real estate valuations in the current market. I stared at the numbers, thinking about Dad's desperation at the birthday party, his fury when I'd arrived late and oil-stained. The Sterling Ventures deal wasn't just business, it was survival. Without a significant capital infusion within 60 days, Elena continued, they're looking at bankruptcy, default on the construction loans, foreclosure on several properties, and probably personal financial ruin for your father. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. Dad's been locked in his office since yesterday. Won't eat, won't talk to Sophia. Lisa Rodriguez says he keeps making phone calls and yelling at lawyers. Tyler's been texting me updates, I told Elena. Apparently my father is having some kind of breakdown. That's not surprising. Elena's tone was matter-of-fact, like she was discussing weather patterns. Men like David Chen don't handle loss of control well, particularly when their carefully constructed world starts collapsing. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Michael. Nat, where are you? I've been trying to find you since yesterday. I'm in a meeting. What's wrong? Everything's wrong. Dad fired Lisa Rodriguez this morning for, quote, sympathizing with family enemies. He's talking about hiring private investigators to dig up dirt on you. This whole situation has gone completely insane. Private investigators to investigate his own daughter. Elena raised an eyebrow, clearly hearing both sides of the conversation. Michael, I have to go. But Michael, you should know that I found out about Mom's trust fund. The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. What trust fund? The $3 million trust fund that Grandpa Thomas set up for me, plus Mom's life insurance, plus the business proceeds, all of which Dad has been stealing from for the past 8 years. Another silence, longer this time. Jesus, Nat, how much? About $5 million, maybe more with penalties. I could hear him breathing on the other end, processing the implications. No wonder he lost it at the party. If you'd found out about the trust that night. He was probably planning to tell me after he'd figured out how to pay it back. Elena Sterling's investment would have given him the liquidity he needed. Elena held up a finger indicating she wanted to speak. I put the phone on speaker. Michael, this is Elena Sterling. Your sister has been helping me understand the family dynamics at Chen Industries, Ms. Sterling. Michael's voice was carefully controlled. I apologize for my father's behavior at the party. It was inexcusable, actually it was revealing. Elena's tone remained professional but cool. It showed me exactly what kind of business partner your father would be. Someone who prioritizes image over integrity, who treats family members as assets to be managed rather than people to be respected. Michael was quiet for a moment. Miss Sterling, I need you to know that not everyone in this family shares my father's values. Some of us believe in doing the right thing even when it's costly. Good to know. Elena's expression softened slightly. Because I have a proposition that might interest both of you. What kind of proposition Sterling Ventures is withdrawing from? Consideration of the Chen Industries partnership as currently structured. However, we're interested in working with individuals who share our commitment to ethical business practices and community impact. Meaning what exactly? Meaning I've offered your sister a consulting position to help us evaluate potential investments in Seattle area development projects. Projects that prioritize sustainable growth and social responsibility over pure profit maximization. I could hear Michael thinking, weighing family loyalty against professional opportunity. The position would require working directly with local community organizations, Elena continued, understanding their needs, building partnerships, ensuring that development projects actually benefit the people they impact rather than displacing them. That sounds like something Nat would be good at, Michael said carefully. It also pays $15,000 per month, Elena added, plus equity participation in successful projects. $15,000 per month. More than I'd made in 3 months at the foundation. There's one condition, Elena continued. The position requires complete independence from Chen Industries. No conflicts of interest. No family pressure to prioritize business deals over community needs. Understood, Michael said. And what about the trust fund situation? That's between your sister and her lawyer. Though I will say that companies with outstanding fiduciary duty violations rarely qualify for Sterling Ventures partnerships. After Michael hung up, Elena refilled our coffee cups and settled back into her chair. Your brother seems more reasonable than your father. Michael's always been the diplomatic one. But he's also loyal to Dad even when Dad's wrong. Loyalty can be admirable, but not when it enables harmful behavior. My phone buzzed with another text from Tyler, this one containing a photo. Dad's office door with a handwritten sign taped to it. Do not disturb, meeting with the legal team. Elena glanced at the photo. He's probably trying to figure out how to minimize his legal exposure on the trust fund matter. Can he do that? Elena shrugged. Wealthy people have lawyers who specialize in making problems disappear. But theft is theft, regardless of how expensive your legal representation is. Before I could respond, Elena's assistant appeared at the conference room door. Ms. Sterling, you have a call from David Chen. He says it's urgent. Elena and I exchanged glances. Put him through. The speakerphone crackled to life. Elena, this is David Chen. I think we need to talk. Hello, David. Elena's voice was perfectly neutral. What can I do for you? I understand you've been meeting with my daughter. I'd like to clarify some misunderstandings about our family situation. There's no misunderstanding, David. I witnessed your behavior at the party. I've made my decision about the partnership. Look, Elena, family dynamics can be complicated. Natalie has always been headstrong, idealistic to a fault. Sometimes tough love is necessary to help young people understand reality. Elena's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Tough love. Is that what you call publicly disowning your daughter for helping a stranger? She embarrassed me in front of the most important business associates I've ever entertained. There have to be consequences for irresponsible behavior. The only irresponsible behavior I witnessed was yours, David. Elena's voice remained calm but carried an edge of steel. The deal is off. Wait, Elena, please, I need this partnership. The company needs this partnership. Surely we can work something out. Perhaps. Elena glanced at me, something calculating in her expression. If you're willing to address the underlying issues that concern me. What issues? The trust fund matters, for starters. My due diligence team discovered some irregularities in your financial filings, specifically the management of your daughter's inheritance. The silence on the other end stretched for nearly 10 seconds. I don't know what you think you've discovered, but I think I've discovered that you've been systematically stealing from your daughter's trust fund to prop up your failing business. Elena's tone was conversational, like she was discussing lunch plans. I think I've discovered that your current financial crisis is largely the result of years of unauthorized borrowing against money. That was never yours to touch. David, that's not how it happened. You don't understand the complexities involved. I understand fiduciary duty, David. I understand Washington state trust law. And I understand that what you've done could result in criminal charges. Another long silence. What do you want? Elena looked at me across the table, her expression unreadable. I want you to make this right. Full restitution to your daughter's trust fund plus penalties. A public acknowledgement of your misconduct. And a binding agreement that Natalie will have complete control over her inheritance without interference. And if I agree to those terms, then we'll discuss a modified partnership structure. One that includes meaningful community oversight and Natalie's involvement in all development decisions. I felt like I was watching a chess game between masters, each move calculated several steps ahead. Elena Sterling wasn't just helping me. She was systematically dismantling my father's position, forcing him to choose between his pride and his survival. David, I need an answer, Elena said. My board meets tomorrow morning to finalize our Seattle investment strategy. I need time to consult with my lawyers. You have until noon tomorrow. After that, Sterling Ventures moves on to other opportunities. The line went dead. Elena leaned back in her chair, looking satisfied with herself. That was intense, I said. That was business. Elena smiled, the expression making her look younger and more approachable. Your father has spent years believing he could control every variable in his life. It's time he learned that some things can't be managed or manipulated, and what happens if he refuses your terms? Then he loses everything. The Sterling Partnership, the company, possibly his freedom if criminal charges are filed. Elena stood up, smoothing her jacket with characteristic precision. But I don't think he'll refuse. Men like your father always choose survival over pride, even if they pretend otherwise. As I gathered my purse and prepared to leave, Elena handed me a final document. A consulting contract with Sterling Ventures, complete with salary details and benefit packages that looked too good to be real. Think it over tonight, she said. Tomorrow is going to be a very interesting day. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October clarity that made Seattle look like a postcard advertising successful urban living. I stood in my apartment kitchen, coffee cup in hand, watching the city wake up while processing the surreal fact that in less than 4 hours, my father would have to choose between admitting to financial crimes or losing everything he'd spent his career building. My phone had been quiet since Elena's ultimatum yesterday afternoon. No calls from Dad, no texts from Michael, no updates from Tyler about the crisis unfolding in the Chen household. The silence felt ominous, like the pause between lightning and thunder. At 11:30, Elena called. Are you ready for this? As ready as someone can be for watching. Their family implode on a conference call. Meet me at my office. David requested an in-person meeting, and I want you there. Why Elena's pause suggested she was choosing her words carefully. Because this isn't just about business anymore. It's about your future, your family's future. And whether it's possible to build something honest from the wreckage your father has created. 40 minutes later, I sat in Sterling Ventures' main conference room, watching Seattle's skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows while Elena reviewed documents with her legal team. The lawyers spoke in the kind of measured tones that suggested they'd handled similar family business disasters before. At exactly noon, David Chen entered the conference room flanked by 2 attorneys who looked like they charged $1,000 an hour for their services. Dad was impeccably dressed as always, but I could see the strain around his eyes. The slight tremor in his hands as he arranged papers on the conference table. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not anger, not disappointment, but something resigned and sad that made my chest tight. Elena, he said, taking a seat across from us, I've come to discuss your terms. Elena remained standing, her posture conveying control without arrogance. Before we begin, I want to make sure everyone understands what we're discussing. You've systematically misappropriated funds from your daughter's trust account over a period of 8 years. The total amount, including penalties and interest, approaches $6 million. My client disputes the characterization of these transactions as misappropriation, one of Dad's lawyers interjected. The trust documents included provisions for family business. Investments, which required beneficiary consent, Elena replied smoothly. Consent that was never sought because Natalie was never informed the trust existed. Dad's jaw tightened. I was protecting her from complicated financial decisions while she was grieving her mother's death and getting established in her career. You were stealing from her, Elena said bluntly. Let's not pretend this was altruistic financial management. The words hung in the air like an accusation that couldn't be taken back. Dad's lawyers shifted uncomfortably while Elena's legal team remained stone-faced. David Elena continued sitting down across from him. Chen Industries currently owes your daughter approximately $5.8 million in trust fund restitution. Your company's liquid assets total less than $3 million. You cannot possibly repay what you owe without external financing, which is why we need the Sterling Ventures partnership, Dad said quietly, to make everyone whole. Everyone was already whole until you decided to use your daughter's inheritance as your personal line of credit. I watched this exchange feeling disconnected from my own life, like I was observing someone else's family drama. The numbers they discussed were abstract, enormous, impossible to relate to my experience of choosing between groceries and student loan payments. Elena, what exactly are you proposing? Dad asked. Full restitution to Natalie's trust account within 90 days. A formal apology acknowledging your misconduct. Complete transfer of trust management to an independent firm. And Natalie's involvement in any Sterling Ventures projects as our community liaison and impact specialist. Dad's face cycled through several emotions. Anger, calculation, resignation. His lawyers whispered urgently in his ears while Elena waited with the patience of someone who held all the leverage. The community liaison position, Dad said finally. What would that entail? Natalie would oversee all community outreach for Sterling projects. In Seattle, she'd ensure that development benefits existing residents rather than displacing them. She'd have veto power over any project that doesn't meet our social impact criteria. Veto power. Dad looked at me directly for the first time since entering the room. So my daughter, who has never run a business or managed a development project, would have the authority to kill deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Your daughter, Elena replied, has spent 5 years building relationships with community organizations throughout Seattle. She understands the needs of working families, homeless youth, and small business owners in ways that pure profit-motivated development ignores. Before Dad could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. Emergency at home. Sophia locked herself in the bathroom crying. Grace is asking why everyone's upset. Dad's not answering his phone. I showed the message to Elena, who nodded grimly. David, Elena said, while you've been trying to negotiate your way out of consequences, your family is falling apart. Your wife is having a breakdown. Your youngest daughter is confused and scared, and your son is trying to hold everything together. That's not your concern, Dad snapped, his composure finally cracking. My family relationships are not part of any business negotiation. They are when they demonstrate a pattern of prioritizing your ego over everyone else's well-being, Elena shot back. The same selfishness that led you to steal from your daughter is destroying your marriage and traumatizing your children. Dad stood up abruptly, his lawyers scrambling to follow. I don't have to listen to this. Actually, you do. Elena remained seated, her calm contrasting with Dad's agitation, because walking out of this room means walking away from the only solution to your financial problems. It means bankruptcy for Chen Industries' foreclosure on your home. And probable criminal charges for fiduciary duty violations. Dad stopped at the door, his back to us. The silence stretched until I couldn't stand it anymore. Dad? My voice sounded smaller than I intended. Just tell me why. Why steal from me? Why let me struggle with money while you had millions of my inheritance sitting in your business accounts? He turned around slowly, and for the first time in days, I saw something genuine in his expression instead of calculation or anger. Because I was scared, he said quietly. When your mother died, I was terrified of losing everything else. The business was struggling. I was making bad decisions, and the trust money felt like a lifeline. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd pay it back with interest once things turned around. But you didn't tell me, because I was ashamed. Because every month that passed made it harder to admit what I'd done. Because I knew you'd look at me exactly the way you're looking at me now. Dad's lawyers were clearly uncomfortable with his candid admissions, but he seemed beyond caring about legal strategy. I'm sorry, Natalie. I'm sorry for stealing from you, for disowning you at the party, for choosing my pride over my daughter. I'm sorry for becoming someone your mother wouldn't recognize. The apology felt genuine, but it also felt too late. Elena's expression remained neutral, waiting for my response. I accept your apology, I said finally, but accepting it doesn't mean pretending the damage didn't happen. Elena stood up, gathering her documents. David, I need your decision. Full restitution, public acknowledgement, and Natalie's involvement in community oversight. Those terms are non-negotiable. Dad looked at his lawyers, who shrugged helplessly. There was no legal strategy that could change the fundamental math of his situation. "I agree to your terms," he said quietly. Elena nodded briskly. "Excellent. We'll have contracts ready by Friday." "Natalie, I'll need your answer about the consulting position by tomorrow morning." As everyone gathered their papers and prepared to leave, Dad approached me hesitantly. "Natalie, would you consider having dinner with the family tonight? Grace has been asking for you and Sophia. Sophia wants to apologize." I looked at this man who'd raised me, who'd stolen from me, who'd publicly disowned me and then been forced to crawl back when his schemes unraveled. Part of me wanted to punish him further, to make him understand the full cost of his choices. But a larger part of me just felt tired. "Dinner sounds fine," I said, "but we eat at my apartment. If Grace wants to see me, she can see how real people live." Dad nodded, looking relieved that I hadn't rejected the overture entirely. Elena watched this exchange with professional interest, like she was taking notes for future reference. As we walked to the elevators, Elena squeezed my shoulder. "You handled that well. Forgiveness without enabling. Boundaries without cruelty." "Is that what this was? That's what healing looks like," she said. "Messy and complicated and never quite as satisfying as revenge would be." The elevator doors opened, and I realized that for the first time in days, I wasn't dreading what came next. Tomorrow, I'd officially become a millionaire. Tonight, I'd cook dinner for my broken family in my tiny apartment, and somehow that felt like progress. Friday afternoon arrived with the kind of Seattle sunshine that made everyone temporarily forget about the months of rain ahead. I sat in Sterling Ventures' main conference room, watching Dad sign document after document while his team of expensive lawyers looked like they were attending a funeral. Each signature represented another piece of his control being stripped away, another acknowledgement that his carefully constructed world had collapsed. James Porter sat beside me, occasionally pointing out clauses that protected my interests or explained the legal implications of various agreements. Across the table, Elena Sterling maintained her professional composure while systematically dismantling 30 years of Chen family power dynamics. "The trust fund restitution agreement," Porter announced, sliding a thick document toward Dad, $6.2 million to be paid within 90 days, plus an additional $1 million in penalties for fiduciary duty violations. Dad's pen hovered over the signature line. His hand trembled slightly, whether from anger or fear or simple exhaustion I couldn't tell. "David," Elena said quietly, "this is the last signature that gives you a path forward. After this, we move to the partnership agreement and start rebuilding." Dad signed his name with sharp, aggressive strokes that betrayed his feelings about the process. Michael entered the conference room as Dad was finishing the paperwork, looking haggard in a way I'd never seen before. He'd been trying to hold Chen Industries together while Dad dealt with lawyers, and Sophia had what Tyler described as a complete emotional breakdown. "How's the family holding up?" Elena asked Michael with what seemed like genuine concern. "Grace doesn't understand why Daddy's sad all the time," Michael replied, settling into a chair beside me. "Tyler's been basically running the household while Sophia sees a therapist every day. It's been rough. And the business. We've had to lay off 12 employees in the past week just to meet payroll. Without this partnership, we'll be filing for bankruptcy by Christmas." Elena nodded, making notes on her tablet, which brings us to the restructuring agreement. She pulled out a new set of documents that looked even thicker than the trust fund paperwork. Chen Industries would become a subsidiary of Sterling Development. Northwest, with Elena's company holding 60% ownership, Dad would retain operational control of day-to-day activities, but all major decisions would require Sterling approval. And Natalie would have final authority on community impact assessments for all development projects. Dad looked up from signing papers. Final authority. Elena's expression was matter-of-fact. If Natalie determines that a project would harm existing communities, displace low-income residents, or prioritize profits over people, she can shut it down regardless of potential revenue. That could cost millions of dollars in lost opportunities, one of Dad's lawyers protested. Elena shrugged. "Then you'll need to design projects that benefit communities instead of exploiting them." Novel concept, I know. I watched this negotiation feeling surreal about my new position. 6 months ago, I'd been begging foundations for $50,000 grants. Now I was being given veto power over projects worth hundreds of millions. Michael leaned over to whisper in my ear, "Are you sure you're ready for this level of responsibility?" Honestly, no, but I've spent 5 years watching developers destroy neighborhoods while claiming they're improving them. Maybe it's time someone with actual community connections had some input. The partnership agreement took another hour to finalize. with lawyers on both sides arguing over liability clauses and profit sharing arrangements. By the time everything was signed, it was nearly 6 p.m. and the Seattle skyline was starting to glow with office building lights. Elena gathered the completed documents with obvious satisfaction. David, these agreements take effect Monday morning. I suggest you spend the weekend preparing your staff for the transition. And Natalie, she continued, turning to me, your first official act as Community Impact Director will be reviewing the Belltown residential project that Chen Industries has been planning for the past year. What's the Belltown project, I asked. Dad's expression grew uncomfortable. 400 luxury condos where the old automotive district used to be. It's been our primary development focus since 2014. Elena's smile was sharp. 400 units starting at $800,000 each, in a neighborhood where the median income is $35,000 annually. I'm sure Natalie will find the community impact assessment fascinating. Before Dad could respond, Tyler's face appeared on Elena's phone screen. She'd given him her direct number during the family crisis, establishing herself as a neutral party who could check on Grace and Sophia without triggering Dad's defensive reactions. Ms. Sterling. Tyler's voice sounded strained even through the phone speaker. We have a situation at home. Dad, you need to come back right away. What kind of situation? Dad asked, immediately alert. Sophia locked herself in the master bathroom about an hour ago. She's not responding to anyone, and Grace is scared. I think she might have taken some pills. The room went completely silent. Dad's face drained of color while Michael grabbed his car keys. Tyler, Elena said calmly, have you called 911? Not yet. I wasn't sure if I should. She's been taking anxiety medication since the whole trust fund thing came out, and I think she might have taken too many. Call an ambulance right now, Elena instructed. We'll be there in 20 minutes. The drive to Bellevue took 15 minutes with Michael ignoring every speed limit and traffic law. Elena followed in her own car while Dad sat in the passenger seat, making phone calls to his personal physician and muttering about privacy and media exposure. We arrived at the Chen family home to find paramedics loading Sophia onto a stretcher. She was conscious but groggy, clearly under the influence of whatever combination of medications she'd consumed. Grace clung to Tyler on the front porch, her 6-year-old face streaked with tears. Mommy's sick, she announced when she saw me running into my arms. The doctors say she has to go to the hospital. She's going to be okay, sweetheart, I told her. Though I had no idea if that was true. Sometimes grown-ups get sad and need help feeling better. Tyler filled us in on what had happened. Sophia had been increasingly unstable since the trust fund revelation, alternating between rage at Dad for his financial crimes and terror about losing their lifestyle. The final trigger had been a phone call from her country club, informing her that their membership was suspended due to unpaid dues. She kept saying that everyone would know, Tyler explained, that all her friends would figure out we were broke and she'd be humiliated. Elena arrived as the ambulance pulled away, Dad riding with Sophia to the hospital. She assessed the scene with the same systematic efficiency she brought to business negotiations. Grace, she said, kneeling down to the little girl's eye level, would you like to stay with Aunt Natalie tonight while your daddy takes care of Mommy? Grace nodded, wiping her nose on her dress sleeve. Can we have pizza? We can have whatever you want, I promised, though I had no idea how to take care of a 6-year-old overnight. Tyler and Michael decided to follow Dad to the hospital while Elena drove Grace and me back to my Capitol Hill apartment. During the ride, Grace chattered about school and friends and her upcoming birthday party, apparently resilient enough to compartmentalize her mother's medical emergency. In my tiny studio apartment, Grace explored everything with the curiosity of someone accustomed to much larger spaces. She examined my secondhand furniture, my small kitchen, and my collection of books like an anthropologist studying a foreign culture. Aunt Natalie, why do you live in such a little house? Because I like little houses, I said, ordering pizza from my phone. They're cozy, and I don't need much space for just me. But now you have lots of money, right? Daddy said you have more money than anyone in our family. The innocence of her question hit me like a physical blow. Dad had told his 6-year-old daughter about the trust fund situation, probably in an attempt to explain why their world was falling apart. Money doesn't always change where you live right away, I explained carefully. And sometimes having a small, comfortable place is better than having a big house that makes you worry all the time. Grace considered this seriously. Like how Mommy cries about the big house. Yeah, sweetheart. Like that. As we waited for pizza, Grace curled up on my secondhand couch and fell asleep watching cartoons on my laptop. I covered her with my only throw blanket and sat in my single chair, processing the surreal fact that I was now responsible for community oversight of a development empire while babysitting my traumatized little sister in a 400-square-foot apartment. My phone buzzed with updates from the hospital. Sophia was stable sedated and would be kept for psychiatric observation. Dad was alternating between genuine concern for his wife and anxiety about potential media coverage of the incident. Elena texted separately, "How are you holding up?" "I'm okay. Grace is asleep. This whole situation is insane." Her response came immediately. "Welcome to what happens when money and family dysfunction collide. Get some rest. Monday's going to be a very long day." I looked at Grace sleeping peacefully on my couch, her face calm in a way it hadn't been since arriving at my apartment. Outside my windows, Seattle hummed with Friday night energy, while inside, my world had become something I barely recognized. On Monday, I'd officially become one of the most powerful people in Seattle. Development. Tonight, I was making sure a scared little girl felt safe after watching her mother have a breakdown. Somehow, taking care of Grace felt like the more important responsibility. 6 months after that stormy October night when I stopped to help a stranger on Interstate 405, I stood in my new office on the 35th floor of the Columbia Center, looking out at Elliott Bay and thinking about how completely my life had transformed. The Seattle Youth Foundation felt like a distant memory, though I still volunteered there on weekends when Sterling Development Northwest didn't need my attention. My official title was Community Impact Director, but Elena Sterling had given me something more valuable than a fancy job description. She'd given me the power to ensure that development projects actually served the people they claimed to help, rather than displacing them in the name of progress. The Belltown residential project had been my first major decision, and it had nearly caused Dad to have his own breakdown. 400 luxury condos starting at $800,000 each, designed to maximize profit while completely ignoring the automotive, workers, artists, and service industry employees who'd called the neighborhood home. For decades, I'd killed the project on my second day as Community Impact Director. Elena had backed my decision completely, even when Dad's lawyers argued that canceling the project would cost Sterling Ventures $12 million in potential revenue. Instead, we'd redesigned the development to include 200 affordable units, community spaces for local businesses, and a job training center run in partnership with Seattle Youth Foundation. The revised project would make less money but would actually improve the neighborhood instead of destroying it. Dad had struggled with the new reality at first. 30 years of operating with complete autonomy didn't translate easily to having his daughter review every decision for community impact. We'd had several heated arguments about profit margins versus social responsibility before reaching an understanding that felt sustainable for both of us. Michael had adapted more quickly, embracing the ethical oversight as a way to build projects the family could actually be proud of. He'd been promoted to Chief Operating Officer of the Seattle Division, with salary and benefits that reflected his new responsibilities. Tyler Williams had surprised everyone by requesting an internship with Sterling Development, spending his afternoons after school learning about sustainable construction and community-oriented design. At 17, he had better instincts for balancing profit with purpose than most adults I'd met in the development world. Grace had recovered from the trauma of her mother's breakdown with the resilience that 6-year-olds possessed in abundance. She spent every other weekend at my new apartment in Queen Anne, a place large enough to have a proper guest room but small enough that we could still eat pizza on the couch and watch cartoons together. Sophia had required more intensive healing. 3 months of inpatient treatment followed by ongoing therapy and a complete restructuring of how she defined success and self-worth. The woman who'd once measured her value in designer handbags and country club memberships was slowly learning to find meaning in volunteer work and genuine relationships. She'd apologized to me formally and extensively, acknowledging her role in the family dysfunction that had allowed Dad's financial crimes to continue unchecked. The apology had felt genuine, though rebuilding trust would take years of consistent behavior rather than words. Dad had kept his promise about full restitution, though it had required selling the Bellevue mansion and most of their luxury possessions. The family now lived in a modest 4-bedroom house in Kirkland, close enough to Grace's school but far from the social circles that had defined Sophia's identity. The adjustment had been difficult for everyone, but particularly for Dad, who'd spent decades believing that wealth equaled worth and control, equaled love. Family therapy with Dr. Sarah Kim had helped him understand how his fear of losing control had nearly destroyed the relationships that actually mattered. Our relationship remained complicated, probably always would be. I loved him, forgave him for his crimes, but would never again trust him with unconditional authority over anyone's welfare. The boundaries Elena had helped me establish weren't walls. They were guidelines for building something healthier than what we'd had before. My trust fund, now properly managed by an independent firm, had grown to almost $15 million, more money than I'd ever imagined having. Though I'd discovered that extreme wealth created its own set of problems. Every charity in Seattle had my phone number. Every social cause needed my financial support. Every family gathering included subtle requests for loans or investments. I'd established strict guidelines about charitable giving, focusing on organizations that served homeless youth and provided job training for people transitioning out of difficult circumstances. The Thomas Peyton Foundation, named after my maternal grandfather, funded scholarships for community college students studying trades and technical skills. But the money that had seemed so important during the crisis had become less central to my sense of purpose. Working with Elena Sterling to develop projects that actually improved communities gave me satisfaction that went beyond any salary or investment return. Elena had become both mentor and friend, someone who understood the complicated intersection of business and social responsibility. She'd taught me that having principles didn't require sacrificing effectiveness, that you could make money while making the world better. Sterling Development Northwest had become a model for ethical development practices, attracting investors who wanted returns that extended beyond pure profit. Our Seattle projects were studied by urban planning programs and featured in architectural magazines as examples of how to grow cities without destroying the communities that made them unique. Last week, I'd received a call from a nonprofit in Portland asking if I'd consider consulting on a similar community impact program for their development projects. The opportunity excited me not because of the money, but because it meant our model was spreading to other cities. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Grace calling from her after-school program. "Aunt Natalie, can you pick me up today? Daddy's in meetings and Tyler has soccer practice." "Of course, sweetheart. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Are we having dinner at your house tonight, if you want to?" "What sounds good? Can we make pancakes for dinner? And can you help me with my school project about family heroes?" I smiled, remembering my own school projects and how Mom had always made time to help despite her busy consulting schedule. "Pancakes for dinner sounds perfect. And I'd love to help with your project." Driving to Grace's school, I thought about the woman I'd been before that October night, before I'd made the split-second decision to help Elena Sterling on Interstate 405. The marketing coordinator at Seattle Youth Foundation who'd worried about rent payments and student loans while sitting on a $12 million trust fund. The daughter who'd accepted crumbs of affection rather than demanding the respect she deserved. That woman felt like a stranger now, someone I'd outgrown through necessity rather than choice. The storm that had stranded Elena's Tesla hadn't just been weather. It had been the catalyst that exposed years of deception and forced our family to confront truths we'd all been avoiding. Sometimes the most destructive events in our lives turn out to be the most necessary. Grace ran toward my car when I pulled up at her school, backpack bouncing and face bright with the uncomplicated joy of childhood. She climbed into the passenger seat and immediately started chattering about her day, her friends, and her teacher's announcement about the upcoming science fair. "Aunt Natalie," she said as we drove toward my apartment, "I'm glad Mommy and Daddy aren't sad anymore. And I'm glad you're not sad anymore either." "Me too, sweetheart." "Me too." That evening, as Grace and I made pancakes for dinner and worked on her family hero project, I realized that helping Elena Sterling had given me more than financial independence or professional success. It had given me the courage to demand better from the people who claim to love me, and the wisdom to know that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's worst behaviors. Grace drew a picture of our family for her school project, including everyone from Dad and Sophia to Tyler and Michael, with me standing in the center wearing what she described as my superhero outfit. When she asked me to explain why I was her hero, I thought about all the complicated ways our story had unfolded, because sometimes I told her, doing the right thing costs you everything you think you want, but gives you everything you actually need. She nodded solemnly, like this made perfect sense. and continued coloring her drawing with the focused intensity that children brought to projects they deemed important. Later, after Grace had fallen asleep in my guest room, I sat on my balcony looking out at the Seattle skyline and thinking about the choices that had led me here, stopping to help Elena Sterling, confronting Dad about the trust fund, accepting Elena's job offer, setting boundaries with family members who'd treated me like a disposal resource. Each decision had felt impossible at the time, but looking back, they'd all been inevitable. Character wasn't built through comfortable choices. It was revealed through moments when doing the right thing required sacrificing something you valued. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever been made to feel small by people who should lift you up, remember this: your worth isn't determined by family approval or financial success. It's determined by how you treat people when no one is watching, and nothing is in it for you. Like and subscribe if you believe that kindness matters more than convenience, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to participate in dysfunction even when it costs you everything. Tell me in the comments what you would have done in my situation, and share this story with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to demand the respect you deserve. Remember, the storm that feels like it's destroying your life might actually be clearing the way for something better than you ever imagined possible.